The counterattacks to relieve the WWII Gap were really a desperate act. And the men who went out there, the Royal Rifles and Hong Kong volunteers, and really anyone they could find, had no chance of succeeding. The Japanese were too strong. And over the days of December 22nd, 23rd, the Japanese just overwhelmed all these men and either killed them or took them prisoner. And most of them were brought here to Repulse Bay, held in the mansions on top of these cliffs. They were then roped together, taken to the edge of the cliff, and executed, and their bodies were kicked over the side here.
Captured in the fighting above the WWII Gap is Corporal Bud Dix.
When they took us prisoner, I was trying to figure out which I preferred, to be shot or have my head cut off. The officer stood beside us with a sword ready to come down. With that, we threw ourselves over the cliff. They opened up on us from above. In falling, I smashed my face on a rock and lost consciousness. When I woke, I thought I was dead. But I found out, you don't die that easily.
As the counterattacks fail, the Japanese advance continues, and they split the island in two, with some forces heading south towards the Stanley Peninsula, while others swing west towards the city of Victoria. In only 3 weeks, the exotic Golden Island of Hong Kong, to which the young, fresh-faced Canadians sailed, has become a desperate and chaotic battlefield. Royal Rifle signalman, Montrealer George Farreau.
Christ, what noise. More bombs. We're trapped like rats. We've been told that the Japs do not take prisoners. I feel sad. I will never see good old Montreal again. Still, it seems so stupid to die this way. The enemy is closing in. The stinking rats got 2 of my buddies. Sharp, Fairley, Orvet died. All 3 recently married. 3 more young widows in Canada.
With Hong Kong's defense forces isolated and fighting desperate, scattered actions, the Japanese unleash a reign of terror against civilians. 52-year-old civil servant, Mai Jo-heng.
The Japs began to search our apartment. Then we were ordered to go out the back door into the yard. I was hit. I fell down. I decided to lie still. I lay there all night, pretending I was dead. The next morning, I heard women crying, and I saw over 30 bodies of Chinese who had been murdered lying in the yard. Of the 9 men who had been in my apartment, I was the only survivor.
As the fight continues in the west of the island, the Japanese push south towards Fort Stanley on Stanley Peninsula. On Christmas Day, they reach St. Stephen's Hospital. At the hospital, overflowing with wounded, doctors and nurses wait for the Japanese to arrive. With them is 20-year-old orderly Alfred Babin. More than 60 years later, Alfred Babin returns to St. Stephen's.
Well, there's a lot of confusion. Nobody knows what to do or what to expect. And we were told that the Japanese didn't take prisoners. And they, with rifle butt, they banged on the door. And when it was opened by Colonel Black, he kind of resisted. He didn't want them to come into the hospital. And he explained to them that, or he tried to explain to them that it was strictly a hospital, but they didn't pay any attention. They just shot him. They were very fierce looking, and their voices were, to us, sounded like staccato. It was very sharp and abrupt. And they had us go up the stairs. These 2 rooms, They were absolutely filled with men. And it was so crowded we couldn't sit down. And the temperature had climbed up to well over 100 degrees. And inside it was suffocating. We asked for water. Someone said, "How do you say water in Japanese?" So someone hollered misu. So then we started to holler misu. And they called to one of the men to come and get misu. So he went out. Then we heard screams and a lot of shouting, and then everything was quiet.
Japanese soldiers continued to rampage through the hospital, torturing, raping, and murdering. Not even the wounded are spared. 20-year-old Sidney Skelton is about to be operated on for machine gun wounds.
I'd been waiting for surgery when the Japs took the hospital, and I had been given some pre-operative anesthetic, and I was pretty groggy. But certain things you never forget. Japs stormed the hospital, throwing grenades and bayoneting the wounded. I rolled under my bed and lay as still as I could. A Jap turned me over and kicked me in the face and tore off my bandages. I didn't move or make a sound. The guy must have thought I was dead and just took off. I heard screams coming from outside. Terrible screams. I can still hear in my head.
We found out after we were released what had happened. When they opened the doors and let us out, and of course we had, the bodies of the people were in their beds, and they had been killed. And there was one body face down the stairs, had been mutilated, eyeballs taken out, so on. And there was a stench of blood really in the air that was terrible, sweet, sickening. About 100 feet from the hospital, we built a huge fire, and then we were told to go around and collect whatever bodies were around. I can't tell you how many, but I know there were a lot of them. So we took them and threw them on the fire. Kind of an eerie thing was when they hit the fire, the air would be blown out of their lungs and their vocal cords would make a noise, so they'd go, And at first the other person thought they were still alive.
Just south of St. Stephen's Hospital, the exhausted survivors of the Royal Rifles of Canada are holding Stanley Village. With them is 19-year-old George MacDonald.
I had no intention of being taken alive, seeing how the Japanese tied their prisoners' hands behind their backs and used them for live bayonet practice. I had buttoned into my shirt pocket one last bullet for myself.
Just after dawn on Christmas morning, George MacDonald and his men in D Company are ordered to drive the Japanese off a strategic height of land overlooking Stanley Village.
In front and slightly above us was a graveyard. I decided we must close quickly or suffer heavy casualties. As soon as my men were spread out on either side of me, I ordered them to fix bayonets and charge. Within seconds, we were upon the enemy in the graveyard, firing our shoulder-slung Bren guns from the hip. A confused and bloody melee of hand-to-hand fighting with bayonets then took place.
This is Stanley Military Cemetery on the southeastern end of Hong Kong Island. By the morning of December 25th, on Christmas Day, basically everyone knew the battle was lost. But around Stanley here, the fighting was quite heavy. The Japanese had in fact taken this hill up here and were controlling the heights overlooking Stanley Village. In really a desperate act, the British general asked the Royal Rifles, D Company, about 120 men, to make a charge and retake this height.
In no more than 2 minutes, we overran the Japanese and cleared the graveyard. We then carried on and pursued the fleeing Japanese survivors to the first line of houses.